Testing, testing.
Can you test again, Adam? I just caught the last bit of that.
Yeah, testing that.
Yep.
Am I clear?
Yeah, no, that's good. Thanks for that. I'll stay on mute and I'll probably turn my video off because I'm sitting in the car.
That sounds like a really good idea. Welcome everybody to Upper Hunter Shire Council's Corporate Services meeting held on the 16th of September 2022. Call this meeting open at 9:00 a.m. And firstly, if I could ask for applications for attending via Zoom link, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have Councillor Burns and the General Manager zooming in this morning.
Could I have a vote on that, please?
Moved.
Thank you. Seconded. And we have a couple of apologies, Director.
Yeah, just noting that Councillor Flaherty and Abbott are still on leave and won't be attending this morning.
Thank you. Are there any disclosures of interest this morning?
Nil, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. With no public participation, I think we move into the financial summary and investment report. Please, Mr. Phelps.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's pretty well a very brief report, being the first month of the new financial year. So a lot of traction and trends haven't happened as yet with this current financial year, and we're pretty well currently tracking along on budget. Overall, our position is a positive position to budget for the July period. So as we read in there in the financial information summary, the first month of the new financial year, majority of council's operational activities are relatively consistent to budget. Traditionally in July, the new financial year, it's relatively quiet, obviously, with doing a lot of year-end processing, pushing back your invoices and revenue back into June. July generally ends up a very quiet month. It's also to note that council is finishing off the 21-22 financial year, and a number of carryover projects from the capital works side of the business will be identified in that process and will be brought into the current 22-23 budget with some votes, which will be proposed in the September meeting, which will happen in October. Just a quick overview of the position of council at the end of July. The main items to make the 429 variance to budget is effectively mainly in the revenue side of things. So with the revenue, we're up about 387 to budget for the month. A couple of contributing factors to that is that we actually received some new grant funding for some tourism events. So we've got a first milestone payment for that. So nearly $200,000 to stimulate the tourism and entertainment sector post-COVID. The other items of note in there are pretty well the general revenue and water and sewer revenue, mainly to do with the pensioner concessions. Obviously, we've levied all our rates for the 22-23 year. However, a lot of pensioner concessions come in after the first month. So that'll come back through over the course of the next 2 months, back into alignment. Another item there is the non-operating revenue. It's down by about 60K at the moment. 52,000 of that relates to internal fleet hire for the month. It's relatively consistent because we're mainly going through and working out our priorities with our work schedules coming through into the 22-23 year. So that should catch up relatively quickly. Operating revenue, expenditure, I beg your pardon. Initial month, everything's pretty well tracking along on budget. There's no major material trends of expenditure noted to date. So it's pretty well coming through. And the capital works expenditure, again, overall dollar terms, it's relatively constant coming through, $22,000 difference. But as I said, with a lot of our carryover projects, we'll be bringing in some votes next month for them. Moving into the budget summary, no change in the budget summary. We haven't done any votes or surrenders for the current month. Our bank and investment funds sitting at the moment at 31.8 million in total funds. 31.5 of that is sitting in our investment portfolio, of which there's a schedule attached to the report. Moving on to the capital expenditure report. Obviously in July, it's 51.9 based on the Depop adopted in June. But as I said earlier, a lot of those projects will move around with some carryovers coming in there. To date, we've spent 341 to the end of July, which only represents just a tick over 0.66%. So obviously we've got a lot of work coming forward into the current year. Just moving then now into the summary pages on pages 6 through to 9. As you can see, these are more or less just a fund summary, as well as our services summary coming through for all the different services within council, which pretty well come back to our initial financial summary overview. Moving then into our financial report, the bank reconciliation on page 10. As you can see, the thing to highlight here is where the actual worm drops away into July. Obviously, the payment of our creditors from June has a major effect, and there's not a lot of grant funding and revenue streams coming through from a cash point of view. Obviously, we levy our rates, but the rates aren't due until the 31st of August. So we'll see a trend coming back the other way in August. Moving then on to page 11, which is our investments held. So we've got 31.5 million in investments. As you can see there, just a list of all our investment bodies that we have invested money into. And it's quite pleasing that a lot of the rates are coming up, obviously after the RBA has increased rates. A prime example of that is probably the second one down, the AMP. We were getting 0.95 initially. Now we're getting 4.25%. So it's a massive jump.
Okay. Could I just ask Mr. Phelps there with those, because our schedule here has those with the old maturity date of August and September for 3 investments there. So the AMP investment's been invested at 4.4, did you?
4.25.
4.25.
Yep.
And the ING?
ING, we effectively redeemed in August.
Yep.
As a cash flow side of things.
Okay, so that's gone into general cash flow.
Yep.
Right.
And Macquarie, I think we invested that again at about 3.9.
So there's $1 million gone into 3.9%.
Yeah, around about
Yeah.
that. So I can confirm that rate though.
Yep.
For you, if you wish.
No, thank you.
So as you can see, as investments come off, we definitely are getting a lot higher rates. Moving then, if I could, Mr. Chair, moving just in then our last report, which is our capital summary to the end of July. So this is more or less where we depict that we've spent 341 against the 51.9, which is 0.66% through for the full year. And then we just give a list of those capital works coming through. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Any questions?
I have one, Mr. Chair, if that's okay, please.
Yeah, thank you, councillor Burns.
Mr. Phelps, I was wondering if it's at all feasible for when we do the new investments, and I'm very glad to hear a 4 in front of the AMP. Is it okay if we could get like an expected yield when we do these new investments? So when we roll it over, you know, this is what we expect to roll it over and then receive from this cash, this investment.
Yeah, we can provide an annualized yield on those investments. That's fine. We can include it into the actual report if you wish.
You know, we have to be very careful and make sure that people know that it's only expected yield. It's not actually what's going to be there. But I think
No,
it can help us with a bit of forward planning.
Yeah, through the chair, Councillor Burns, it will be the actual number because they're term deposits effectively. So it's going to be the yield based on the percentage against the principal. So there won't be any change from the yield. There won't be it won't be an estimate. It'll be an actual yield.
Okay. Right. Thank you. I do enjoy this meeting. I learn a lot every time.
Councillor Burns, just to clarify, are you looking at the yield for the current financial year or the yield to maturity of the actual investment?
I think the yield to maturity on the actual investment would be best. So possibly another column next to the maturity date.
Yeah, that's fine. So we can do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you, councillor Burns. I hope you're comfortable there. I probably do have a bit of a vague question for you there, Mr. Phelps. Just looking at through our capital works expenditure, obviously very early in the year, and with our projections being set back a month as per the new charter. Just wondering, what's your feel? What large projects have we started now that you're seeing receipts for already, or invoices for already, and how are we tracking on those?
Through the chair, overall, it's been very light in regards to expenditure on a lot of major projects. We have a lot of major ones that will come the back end of the financial year, being the CBD, and a lot of major road projects going out Moon Brook Road and Barrington Forest Road. And obviously the bridges, the replacement bridges. So that will happen in the back end of the current financial year.
Yeah, sure. I just wonder, and maybe this could perhaps be a slightly unrealistic discussion or request, but in workflows, I presume as an operation, you would have a yearly plan, as we have the plan overall of timing of larger expenditure. And is that at all presentable, accessible there?
Yep. Yes, through the chair, we can provide our monthly projections going forward. Obviously, those projections will chop and change based on weather events and also availability of contractors. But definitely, we can provide the full 12-month view. That's fine.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, every project is phased by month in the budget, and obviously the year-to-date budget for this report is the phasing component for July. So you'll see that it's not obviously 1/12 of the actual budget. And it's actually pretty much spot on the year-to-date budget versus actual. Obviously one of the biggest projects there is the town revitalisation in Scone, which is about to go to the tender phase.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Director. And probably the reason for my discussion is I tend to have quite a lot of discussions with directors on how projects are going, and I was just thinking that perhaps it could be advantageous for councillors to have a little bit of a mud map, and maybe we can have that discussion on the viability, so we're not having to ask questions that probably could be answered with a spreadsheet, and taking up time.
Yeah, through the chair. Obviously, with the 11 months projection going out, the report will quite be large. So, so we might have to provide it as a A3 type paper at the meetings as we're coming through, if that's okay. And we can bring it up on the screen, obviously, as we go through. In the infrastructure services meeting, we'll probably be providing that information going forward of the projections going out. So normally we used to do that initially.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. And sorry, General Manager, you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. I think Mr. Phelps has probably alluded to what I was going to say, which is a lot of the information you're requesting is provided in the Infrastructure Services Capital Works report. So that works report actually goes through the major projects and gives an estimate of the project timing, whether it's on track from a time perspective, whether it's on track from a expenditure perspective, provides a little bit more commentary, and then is also accompanied by a detailed spreadsheet which shows actual spend against budget. So I think most of that information is probably available to you through that infrastructure services report, but if there's further information, we're happy to provide it.
Yeah, wonderful. And thank you for that response.
Any further questions?
I think there's no further questions to be taken, Mr. Phelps, and I ask that we have a mover for the recommendation that we 1, note the fund and function summary report, 2, note the cash and investment report, 3, note the responsible accountant's officer's statement on investments, and 4, note the capital works expenditure report.
I move.
Mover. Councillor Burns, thank you. And I'll second that. So if we can just move on to questions taken on notice, and I see there were none. Just ask if there's any further questions from the meeting today.
No, Mr. Chair.
Everybody appears to be happy, and I wish you the best of health, Councillor Burns. Thank you very much for attending
Thank
today.
you, sir.
It's much appreciated. And I think we'll call this meeting closed at 9:16 a.m. please, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you all.